The merciless sun shines over the Balkans. The year 971, Dorostolon stands impregnable, with double walls, moats, and palisades. Sviatoslav, with nearly 20,000 warriors, Kievan Rus retinues, Bulgarian allies, and remnants of the garrison, prepares to fight the battle that will decide the fate of his campaign and his state. Having lined up his infantry in a dense wall of shields and spears, he awaits the Byzantine assault. Horses strike the ground with their hooves, arrows hiss through the air, swords flash. Day turns to night. The Kievan Rus fighters hold their ground, but are eventually forced to retreat, and the initiative passes to the Byzantine Emperor, John Zimisces. The Byzantines surround the city. Earth ramparts, moats, siege towers. Their fleet blocks the Danube, cutting off supplies. Inside Dorostolon, Sviatoslav fortifies the gates and sets up catapults. Sudden sorties by the Kievan Rus warriors. Fire, smoke, cries. They strike directly into the enemy's siege lines. The Byzantines are astonished by their bravery. The warriors throw themselves into the thick of battle, without fear of death. After 2 months, the decisive battle. The Kievan Rus soldiers' ranks block the bend of the Danube. The first attack is devastating, but the emperor counterattacks. Luring the warriors onto the plain, he encircles them from the flanks. The ranks tighten toward the center. Chaos. Many soldiers fall. Part of the army manages to break through to the walls, but Sviatoslav is wounded. The Danube runs red with blood. Between the Baltic and the Black Seas, from scattered tribal unions, a powerful state was born, Kievan Rus. It gave rise to the Kingdom of Ruthenia, the predecessor of Ukraine, the Grand Duchy of Moscow, the future Russia, and the Principality of Polotsk, the ancestor of modern Belarus. Between forest and steppe, at the crossroads of trade routes and cultures, a new type of society emerged. Not just a tribe or a military alliance, but a community capable of creating a state. Ancient authors first mentioned the Slavs, and for the Greeks and Romans, they were still barbarians. But in fact, they were already a people who laid the foundation of a powerful statehood, capable of enduring the trials of centuries. From here, from the depths of Slavic lands, a world would begin to form that would change the history of Eastern Europe. Archaeology shows that the history of the Slavs is much older. They cultivated wheat, smelted iron, and wove linen. This world was far from the one described in nomadic myths. Nations did not replace one another. They grew like a tree from their own root. The clan community gradually became a chiefdom. Alongside elders appeared warriors, craftsmen, merchants. Fortified hill forts were built to protect against steppe nomads. Trade arose along the Dnipro, Desna, and Pripyat. The tribes, Polans, Drevlians, Severians, Dregoviches, interacted with one another. Each union had its own center, its own gods, its own leaders. These were not yet states, but they were already sprouts. The early Slavic unions became the link between the Antes and the future Ruthenians of the Kievan state, living proof of continuity, from community to principality, from union to state. Here, a community took shape that knew how to fight, trade, and pray. It was united not only by blood and language, but also by land, rivers, and shared rituals. On this foundation, the Slavic world was born, and with it, one of the most powerful states of the early Middle Ages, Kievan Rus. Eastern Europe was never cut off from the world. The forests and rivers that seemed like borders were actually roads. The Slavs lived alongside Greeks, Germans, and nomads. The Avars, horsemen from the Asian steppes, created a Khaganate in Pannonia, and for a short time subjugated part of the Slavs. In the 6th to 7th centuries, the Slavs rose up against them. In those battles, their freedom-loving and warlike character was forged. In the south, the Slavs increasingly came into contact with Byzantium. Their boats sailed along the Danube as far as Thrace and the outskirts of Constantinople. Chroniclers wrote how the Slavs crossed shallows, burned cities, and took tribute. Alongside wars came the exchange of goods, coins, and new ideas. To the east, the Slavs' neighbors were the Khazars, a nomadic people who controlled the routes between the Don and the Caspian Sea and collected tribute. But the Slavs adapted. They traded in furs, wax, honey, and weapons. Thus, they entered the system of great exchanges, from the Baltic to the Caucasus. In a land without natural borders, where even rivers were more like roads than barriers, peoples had to either coexist or fight. And it was the Slavs, not the strongest but the most adaptable, who endured. They knew how to unite. In the Middle Dnipro region appeared the first great centers: Kyiv, Lubeck, Iskorodzin. An ancient legend tells of three brothers, Ki, Shek, and Horiv, and their sister Libid, who founded Kyiv on the Dnipro hills. The city became a symbol of the rise of local tribes and the heart of the East Slavic world. It was on the Dnipro hills that the Polans lived. The advantageous location on the trade route from the Vikings to the Greeks made Kyiv a key hub between the Baltic and Byzantium. Nearby lived the Slovenes and the Kriviches, the Severians and the Drevlians. Their gods ruled over natural forces and various aspects of tribal life. Perun, the god of thunder and war. Dajbo, of the sun. Mokosh, of fertility. Veles, of trade and art. The first Slavic rulers began to form political power. According to legend, Princes Oskold and Dir elevated Kyiv to the level of a center not only of the Polans, but of a broader tribal community, establishing ties with Constantinople. Oskold's campaign against Byzantium in 860 became the first loud manifestation of Kyiv's power. In fact, the first appearance of Kievan Rus on the European stage. According to tradition, it was then that he accepted baptism, taking the name Nicholas. Perhaps he foresaw the necessity of the spiritual choice that would soon determine the fate of Kievan Rus. Kyiv became a political and cultural center, and the once fragmented tribes became a people forming their own state. In the 9th century, trade and military expeditions flourished in northern Europe. The Scandinavian kings, skilled seafarers and warriors, carved their routes along the rivers of Eastern Europe, linking the Baltic and Black Seas. They came not only with the sword, but also with trading experience, organizational skill, and the ability to govern. For the Slavs, they became allies, trade partners, and carriers of new political ideas. In the legend of the calling of the Vikings was reflected the desire of the local tribes for stability. They supposedly turned to the Viking Rurik, asking him to rule over them and judge them justly. Modern historians view this story not as an actual event, but as a symbol of political maturation, as the northern military elite gradually merged into the Slavic environment and established a new form of authority. Kievan Rus was born not through conquest, but through the unification of forces and traditions. The Vikings were active traders. The well-known route from the Vikings to the Greeks brought them Byzantine jewels, wine, and spices, and also allowed them to trade in goods and enslaved Slavs. This shows that even during trade expeditions, the Vikings carried out raiding campaigns and controlled Slavic lands. Another important trade route ran along the Volga to the Arab Caliphate. From there, the Vikings brought Arab silver, which later became one of the first monetary units of Kievan Rus. The Vikings also protected these routes from nomadic raids, especially near the Dnipro Rapids. After Rurik's death, power passed to his commander Oleg. He understood that the strength of the new state lay not in the marshy lands around Lake Ilmen, but on the Dnipro hills of Kyiv, the crossroads of trade routes. In 882, Oleg marched south and, through cunning, captured Kyiv, where Askold and Dir ruled. He proclaimed the city the mother of Kievan Rus cities, a symbol of the unity between the north and the south. However, Oleg's fame came from his campaign against Constantinople, which was considered unreachable for northern peoples. According to the tale of bygone years, in 907 the Prince of Kiev led a great army southward. The ships of the Vikings and Slavs sailed down the Dnipro, crossed the Black Sea, and approached the walls of the Byzantine capital. The Byzantines locked the harbor with iron chains. Oleg placed his ships on wheels and advanced overland straight to the city walls. The astonished Greeks agreed to negotiate. In 911, Kievan Rus concluded a favorable treaty with Byzantium. It was Kyiv's first major diplomatic success. Byzantine sources do not mention the details of this event. Byzantium recognized Kievan Rus as an equal party, granted Kyiv's merchants the right to duty-free trade, and guaranteed diplomatic protection. According to the Chronicle, after the successful campaign, Oleg nailed his shield to the gates of Constantinople as a symbol of a new power rising on the Dnipro. This campaign had significance far beyond military glory. For the first time, Kievan Rus presented itself as an independent state, capable of negotiating with an empire. Oleg's rule consolidated the political unity of the lands, subjugating the main tribal unions, the Polans, Drevlians, Severians, Slovenes, and Kriviches. For the first time, authority emerged that did not depend on any single tribe, but stood above them all. Oleg established Kyiv as the capital and a symbol of unity. He created the first administrative mechanisms, a system of tribute collection known as polyudia. The prince and his retinue traveled through the subordinate lands, received gifts, supervised their subjects, and reinforced their authority. According to the Chronicle, Oleg's final years were rather mystical. The sorcerers told the prince that he would die because of his own horse. So Oleg decided never to see it again. A few years later, the horse died. While inspecting its bones and mocking the prophecy, the prince stepped on the horse's skull. A serpent crawled out and bit him. The words of the sorcerers came true.
Sadly, snake venom claimed the life of Prince Oleg. But did you know that in the Middle Ages, snake venom was actually considered a valuable medicine? From poisonous snakes, people made decoctions, powders, and ointments that were believed to help ease the symptoms of leprosy, a disease that's rare today, but in medieval times was widespread and terrified people. You probably recognize this man. That's Baldwin IV, king of Jerusalem, who suffered from leprosy. There's a video about his life and how he lived with the disease on my channel, Healing History. I also talk about the medieval plague, the so-called Black Death, and how it devastated Europe. There's a video about ancient anesthesia, and if you're interested in the history of warfare, in another episode I explain what military doctors knew in ancient Rome, the Middle Ages, and Napoleon's army. As you probably guessed, my channel Healing History is all about the history of medicine, and it's full of fascinating stories you probably never heard before.
The story of Oleg's death reflects the pagans' ideas about the inevitability of fate and the connection between humans and nature. However, historians believe that Oleg died during a campaign in the Caucasus, probably around the year 912, near the Caspian Sea. After Oleg's death, power passed to Igor, Rurik's son, according to the Chronicle. He continued the policy of centralization. Igor sought to strengthen Kyiv's authority over all subordinate tribes, especially the Drevlians. After Oleg's death, they had tried to regain independence. The prince subdued them again and imposed tribute, restoring Kyiv's control in the west. He also annexed the Uliches tribe, giving the state access to the lower Dniester region and strengthening its influence in the northern Black Sea region. Kyiv's power grew and spread over new lands. The former tribal union became a single political system. An important part of Igor's rule were his campaigns against Byzantium. In 941, he sailed with a large fleet to the shores of Asia Minor. According to Byzantine sources, the Kievan Rus army numbered several hundred ships and ravaged the coasts. Emperor Roman I Lekapinos sent a fleet against him armed with Greek fire, an incendiary mixture that could not be extinguished by water. The Kievan Rus ships were burned, and Igor barely escaped. 3 years later, the prince gathered a new army and again marched on Byzantium. This time, he concluded a peace treaty that restored trade between Kyiv and Constantinople and confirmed Rus' status as an equal partner of the empire. Igor met a brutal death. According to the chronicle, after collecting tribute from the Drevlians, the prince decided to return and take more. He had already sent most of his retinue back to Kyiv. The Drevlians took advantage of this and rebelled. They captured the prince near Iskorodzin. The tale of bygone years recounts that he was executed by being tied to 2 bent trees, which, as they straightened, tore his body apart. After Igor's death, power passed to his wife, Princess Olga. She became one of the most remarkable rulers in the early history of Rus. The princess not only managed to preserve the throne, but also to bring order out of chaos. At first, Olga took cruel and deliberate revenge on the Drevlians for her husband's execution. When Igor was killed, the Drevlians sent envoys to Kyiv with a proposal. Olga should marry their prince, Mal. This was their plan to subjugate the city. The princess punished the envoys. The first delegation was buried alive, and the second was burned in a bathhouse. Then she went to Iskorodzin to hold a funeral feast for her husband, but during the commemoration, she ordered a massacre. A year later, Olga returned to the city and offered the Drevlians an easy tribute in exchange for lifting the siege: 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from every household. The Drevlians complied, but Olga ordered that smoldering embers be tied to the birds' legs. When the birds flew back to their nests, the city burst into flames. Iskorodzin burned to the ground. Those who fled were either killed or enslaved. Olga demonstrated that there was strict order in Kyiv. The prince's power was unshakable, and punishment for rebellion was inevitable. After crushing the Drevlians, Olga turned to reforming the state's administration. She reorganized the system of tribute collection. Instead of the dangerous Polyudya, the prince's yearly tax-collecting tours, she introduced ustavi, charters, and pogosti, designated collection centers. This marked the creation of the first taxation system in Rus. It was not merely an economic reform. It was the beginning of a new order that curtailed the arbitrary power of the warrior elite and established the authority of law. Olga's foreign policy began with contact with Byzantium. In 957, the Princess of Kyiv traveled to Constantinople. According to the chronicle, she was received with the honors befitting a ruler by Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus himself. During her visit, Olga was baptized and took the Christian name Helena, setting a new direction for Kievan Rus: spiritual rapprochement with Byzantium. Legend says the emperor wished to marry her, but Olga cleverly declined by making him her godfather. Her journey had both religious and diplomatic significance. The princess negotiated alliances and trade privileges. The emperor himself wrote in his treatise that the barbarian princess displayed wisdom and dignity that commanded respect for Kievan Rus. After her baptism in Constantinople, Olga sought to strengthen Christianity's position in Rus. As a sign of these intentions, she later sent envoys to Otto I, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, requesting missionaries. Otto granted her request and dispatched monks led by Adalbert, but their mission ended in failure. Under Olga's rule, two worlds met: the pagan heritage of the ancestors and a new vision of a state founded on order and faith. During her reign, Kievan Rus became a truly organized power, governed not only by the sword, but also by reason. In 964, her son Sviatoslav assumed power. He inherited not only the throne, but also his mother's determination. Sviatoslav became the embodiment of Kievan Rus' military might. Fearless in distant campaigns and grand in his ambitions, his era was one of territorial expansion, growing influence, and the establishment of Kievan Rus as a major power on the international stage. His first major campaign was against the Vyatiges in 964 and other tribes in the northeast. Sviatoslav subdued them, freeing them from dependence on the Khazar Khaganate. His southern campaigns became legendary. First, Sviatoslav crushed Volga, Bulgaria, forcing it to pay tribute. Then, in 964 to 965, he marched against the Khazar Khaganate, a powerful state that controlled key trade routes between the Black and Caspian Seas. It was then, according to the Chronicle, that his famous words were spoken: "I want to come at you." Sviatoslav captured the capital Atil, destroyed the main fortresses, and effectively ended Khazar power in the North Caucasus and Lower Don regions. This brought Kievan Rus a brief advantage: control over eastern trade routes. But in place of the Khazars came the Pechenegs, ushering in an age of relentless border wars. His triumph soon turned into a new threat. After the Khazar campaign, Sviatoslav turned his attention to the Danubian Bulgars. At the time, the Bulgarian Empire, weakened by internal strife and Byzantine pressure, was an inviting target. For Sviatoslav, this was not just another war. He saw in Bulgarian lands a strategic stronghold, a gateway to the Balkans, and control over trade routes linking the Danube, the Black Sea, and Byzantium. In 968, the prince led a powerful army, possibly 20 to 30,000 warriors, though chronicles mention far greater numbers, in a new campaign. The Kievan Rus forces broke through Bulgarian defenses, captured several fortresses, and inflicted crushing defeats on local rulers. Sviatoslav seized key cities, including Preslav, and moved his headquarters to Pereyaslavets, effectively turning part of Bulgaria into a base for future campaigns. His advance was so swift that neighboring rulers fell into panic. Yet Sviatoslav was not only a formidable warrior, he was also a skilled strategist. His Balkan campaign entangled three great powers: Kievan Rus, Bulgaria, and Byzantium, in a delicate game. At first, Emperor Nikephoros Phokas supported the Kiev prince against the Bulgars, but soon realized the danger of such an alliance. The Kievan Rus commander had become a new force that could no longer be easily restrained. The Byzantines began seeking ways to negotiate, through gifts, promises, and diplomacy. Meanwhile, Sviatoslav openly declared his intention to move the capital of Kievan Rus from Kyiv to Pereyaslavets on the Danube. This was more than ambition. Sviatoslav envisioned Rus not merely as a steppe realm, but as a central power in European trade and politics. After his victories over Bulgaria, Sviatoslav established himself on the lower Danube, turning Dorostolon into a Kievan Rus main stronghold in the region. Yet his ambitions alarmed Byzantium. The new emperor, John Zimisces, an experienced military leader, decided to act personally, to march, bring Bulgaria back under imperial control, and eliminate Sviatoslav as a dangerous rival. Meanwhile, the Prince of Kyiv had no intention of retreating. He allied with the Bulgars and Pechenegs and marched south, directly against the empire. His goal was Constantinople. Nonetheless, at Arcadiopolis, the Kievan Rus army suffered its first major defeat at the hands of the Byzantines. In the spring of 971, the Byzantine army, about 30 to 35,000 strong, crossed the Balkans and quickly captured Preslav, where the Bulgarian Tsar Boris II resided. Then the troops advanced on Dorostolon, where Sviatoslav had fortified himself with an army of roughly 15 to 20,000 warriors, Rus družinas, Bulgarian allies, and remnants of local garrisons. Dorostolon stood on a high hill on the right bank of the Danube, protected by double wooden earth walls, a moat, and a palisade. Sviatoslav deployed his forces outside the city, hoping to repel Jan Zemyskis before the siege began. At the front line, he placed infantry, a dense wall of shields and spears ready to meet the blow. The Byzantines arrayed heavy cavalry, infantry, and archers. The battle raged without a clear advantage for either side. But as darkness fell, Sviatoslav was forced to withdraw his troops. The initiative passed to the emperor. Soon, the Byzantines encircled the city from land. They built earthen ramparts, dug moats, and constructed wooden towers to bombard the walls. The imperial fleet blocked the Danube, cutting off the city's supplies. Inside Dorostolon, Sviatoslav ordered the gates reinforced, new palisades and catapults installed. The siege dragged on. Rus detachments made sudden sorties, burning siege engines and capturing enemy supplies. According to the Byzantine historian Leo the Deacon, Sviatoslav's warriors threw themselves into the thick of battle without fear of death. After 2 months of siege, the prince decided to sally forth for a decisive battle. This occurred at the end of July 971. The Rus army again formed a wall of shields with a wide front. Their lines fully blocked the bend of the Danube to protect the flanks from enemy cavalry. The first Kievan Rus assault was devastating. The Byzantines suffered heavy losses, but the emperor himself saved the situation, personally leading a cavalry counterattack. Sviatoslav continued to press forward, and Zemyskis feigned a retreat, luring the enemy onto the plains. There, the emperor's cavalry suddenly outflanked the Kievan Rus forces and closed the circle. The Kievan Rus ranks collapsed toward the center, losing cohesion. With heavy casualties, part of the army managed to break back to the city walls. Even so, Sviatoslav was wounded. After the defeat, the prince agreed to negotiations. He concluded a peace with Byzantium, leaving the Balkans, but retaining the right of free trade and passage for Rus merchants to Constantinople. Furthermore, the emperor, impressed by his bravery, allowed Sviatoslav to sail back to Kyiv unimpeded, taking with him a large amount of loot. Yet, on the way home, near the Dnipro rapids, Sviatoslav fell into an ambush by the Pechenegs. In the unequal fight, he was killed by Khan Kuraya. According to the chronicle, the Pechenegs learned of the prince's return from Pereyaslavets. Nonetheless, historians suggest that Emperor Jan Zemyskis may have secretly warned Kuria to eliminate a dangerous rival for good. Thus ended the first heroic era of Kievan Rus formation. Sviatoslav was one of the pagan Rus princes who saw the state not as a single city, but as a power capable of influencing the wider world.